Welcome to another episode of Tech Society with your hosts, tech entrepreneurs and software pioneers, John Newham and Alex Dunmo.
And before we begin this episode, just quickly, is it time for your business to evolve? Yes, it is. So come see Ninja Software, njs.dev. All right, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to another episode of Tech Society.
Today, we talk with Vince Hughes, CEO of Crime Stoppers Western Australia and a very close friend of Ninja. We speak about his role at Crime Stoppers and their new whistleblowing platform built in partnership with Ninja Software called Safe to Say.
Today you'll learn about the dangers to your organization of not having an anonymous reporting system, what drives people to report corruption or toxic behavior in the workplace, and our own personal experiences with toxic workplaces and how we dealt with it.
All right, let's dive in.
Look, my name is Vince Hughes and I'm the CEO of Crime Stoppers in Western Australia. I'm also a director of Crime Stoppers Australia and a director of Crime Stoppers International. And I've been around the world of law enforcement for more years than I care to remember, as they say. So it's hitting 40 years now nearly. I started with the Irish Police, then came over to Western Australia as an international student. After studying policing studies and other social sciences units, I headed back to Ireland and commenced policing again. Returned to Western Australia a year later on the demands of my children who wanted to come back. Joined the West Australian Police, but not as a police officer, but as an intelligence analyst. And then spent quite a lot of my time in the intelligence world working for the National Crime Authority, Corruption and Crime Commission, back to WA Police. And then I ventured into leadership development with the Public Sector Commission. From the Public Sector Commission and then through certain events, I ended up as Crime Stoppers CEO.
Brilliant. All right. So tell us a bit about Crime Stoppers.
Well, Crime Stoppers is an independent organisation set up back in Albuquerque in New Mexico. It was really set up to encourage anonymous reporting. That concept has spread across the world, came to Australia in the early 90s, and in Western Australia, we celebrated 25 years this year. So we're 25 years operating in the world of anonymity, providing anonymity to people.
A lot of people don't realise that it's not actually owned by the police, right?
No, and to some degree, I suppose that's very useful because that gives us a strength as well. But we are independent to police. We are a not-for-profit. We are a registered charity. And yeah, look, we do our best to try and get funding in as best we can, but we've operated well for 25 years. I'd like to say that for the last, we'll say, 20 years, Crime Stoppers operated predominantly with telephones, but then now we have moved into online reporting. Online reporting is now, if not meeting the same amount of contacts as telephone, it's probably in this year we'll see an overlap of more online reports. And that's also got to do with the trust people have in the online reporting.
So what was the world of anonymous reporting like before Crime Stoppers was incepted?
The world of anonymous reporting, I don't think it ever was. I don't think you really could say there was the world of anonymous reporting. Crime Stoppers probably has come up with that concept of anonymity. And even today, we'll say, under the Treasury Laws Amendment Enhancing Whistleblowers Protection Act of 2019, that is the only legislation that I know of that actually says that you can actually report something anonymously. The legislation is actually weak in that it doesn't define what anonymous is.
Yeah.
So we define anonymous ourselves as it's a completely different to confidential. Confidential is the person knows who you are, but probably won't release your information. Anonymous is we don't know who you are, and we're not going to try and find out either.
Yeah, we can't release your information.
And we can't release the information under the policies we have. Like we do have memorandums of understanding with all the law enforcement agencies across the world that we will not release information.
Which, of course, doesn't stop them from asking.
I was about to ask.
When it's technically impossible, that's true anonymity.
The ideals of anonymity isn't that at odds with what the intelligence organizations strive for, which is intelligence about the people that are making the tips as well?
Yeah, well, look, intelligence really is an extended form of information. At the end of the day, any investigation operates like a jigsaw. If I give you the analogy of a jigsaw, you'll sit down, you'll open the box, and you don't know where to start. That's your problem, is I need to start this jigsaw. If I get to the end, my investigation is finished. The last piece I put in is the one that I can put the brief together and take that person to court. Well, you know that you'll start somewhere in the investigation.
Yeah.
And you will always say, I've 5 or 6 pieces missing, and if I had a piece here, I could start again. Well, it's like somebody ringing the police, giving you some information. You don't really know who don't need to know who they are in many cases. It would be nice to know, so to see, can you get more information? And we do encourage people to leave their details, but a lot of people don't want to leave their details for lots of reasons. So if they can give you that piece of the jigsaw to start you in the top left-hand corner, and then you start to add around that, well, that's as good. That's probably, I call that the gold nugget. If you can get the gold nugget of information, it doesn't really matter who gave it to you.
And so when we first met, as John and I, as Ninja Software, we managed to sell you on the idea of putting that reporting system through Tor.
Yeah, and that was a very, serendipitous meeting. It came about, as you know, Alex, through you and John purchasing the hosting company that we owned, and out of courtesy you rang me and said we now hosting your systems, and I was a bit horrified to think that who are you, more or less. So we sat down and we had a good conversation, and things worked well. But I remember asking the question, by the way, Alex, how anonymous are we? I don't know if you remember your response, but you said, do you understand half pregnant? And I said, yeah, well, that's the situation we don't want to be in.
Yeah.
And I also didn't remember you saying, well, do you understand, do you heard about the dark web? Have you heard about the onion router and the Tor network? And I began to get a little bit uneasy to think, so now you want me to use dark web technology, you want me to use the onion router, and how am I going to convince my board that this is something? But when you think about it, it was the way forward. It was the sensible thing to do. The board agreed straight away once we put the proper, I suppose, business case to them. And I think we have done that well for the last number of years now. And I know other Crime Stoppers jurisdictions in Australia are using it. I know that Crime Stoppers International uses it. So any of the calls that come internationally, the Crime Stoppers International use it. So I suppose you should be very proud of what you've put together, and not alone that you've done it as well with a fairly altruistic approach to all of this as well. Otherwise, we could never have put this in place. So thank you for that.
We enjoy the technical solution of using something that I guess people they have some misconceptions about Tor, that it's primarily for drug dealers and other horrible things online.
Yeah.
Not understanding that it was created actually as an intelligence tool for
The US Navy.
Yeah, for operatives to be able to communicate safely outside of hostile areas.
Yeah, but I suppose an analogy is cocaine can be used for good.
Yeah.
Methamphetamines are used for good. They're just also. But look, and this is not disparaging of police. At the end of the day, criminals tend to always be ahead of the policing world. As much as policing try and hard, criminals are thinking about that all the time. How do we get one step way ahead of law enforcement? And they use Tor because it was a useful tool for them to use. We just use it for the right thing. They use it for the incorrect thing.
Yeah, although they might use it to actually, pass information to the police.
Well, we do know that many criminals pass information to police as well.
Yeah.
And some criminals do have values. There is a certain point where a criminal won't step over. It's that I suppose threshold is probably a lot higher than what you and I would accept as a threshold. But criminals will tend to say, you might have a criminal who I'm only into burglaries. That's it. I'll stick with burglaries. That's what I do. Now, if I go into assaulting people or raping people or child abuse, that's a different matter, and I want to report that information.
Yeah.
So yes, it's open to everyone.
Honor among thieves, kind of.
Yeah, or dishonor among thieves. But at the end of the day, Crime Stoppers is open to everyone, and some of the most important information we get is from people who are close to criminality.
And so the next step for this technology is the next project we partnered on, which is Safe to Say.
Yes.
So can you tell us a bit about Safe to Say?
Well, Safe to Say has come around as a result of the anonymity with Crime Stoppers has worked so well for the last 25 years. You look at your expertise and you say, what are we good at? And that's what we're good at. We're good at providing anonymity. Now, there is also a need within the corporate world to provide anonymity to employees, to family members, to contractors, to customers. And if I was running an organisation, I would love to know what's happening in my organisation.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to find out what's happening. I may not like what's happening, but I'd like to know what's happening. So this provides people with an independent external reporting platform to be able to report anonymously should they choose. Like everything else with Crime Stoppers, you can leave your details.
Yeah.
But most people will choose not to. 30%, funny enough, that's the statistic we have, will leave the details. 70% won't use it. But we also know that research is very strong that if you have an internal anonymous, as you so-called anonymous platform, people don't trust it.
Yeah.
And they will tell you, if they use it, they will tell you what they think you want to hear. But if you provide an external anonymous platform, they tell you what you need to hear.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. It could be a piece of information that might save your company. It could be a piece of information that you think, I'm glad I knew that straight away before somebody else found out about it. So that's what Safe to Say is essentially for.
We're big supporters of that idea, and that's why we're really happy to be partnered with you on Safe to Say. We run our company through Safe to Say now. So our staff give anonymous reports and anonymous tips or just tell us how we're performing as leaders. And I think any good leader has to be able to take that anonymous feedback. It's important.
Yeah, look, we're all humans. We don't like negative comments.
Yeah.
People say it's I'm giving you constructive criticism, and that might be the case. We don't like it. We like to be told we're doing great. We like to be told we're the best people. But at the end of the day, the reality is sometimes things will go wrong. Sometimes things are happening in the background that you can't possibly be across. And people are very good at hiding inappropriate behaviour.
Yes, from management.
From management,
less so from colleagues and co-workers, right?
Yeah, colleagues are probably, they refer to them as the eyes and the ears of your organisation.
Yeah.
They know what's happening. And hopefully Safe to Say we'll give a tool where people sometimes say, well, if you have a mortgage, you're not going to report inappropriate behaviour. And I suppose that's true to a degree. People feel that they need to protect themselves. But also, knowing something about that inappropriately happening in an organisation can actually, it can corrode a person's mental state as well.
Yeah.
It can actually cause them to be, I suppose, to get anxious about this happening. And they need to be able to release that.
Get it off their chest. Yeah.
They need, it's like the plumbing system without a vent, without a release valve. Safe to Say is like a release valve for people who, and it may not happen to you, it could take a year before, 2 years, 3 years before somebody discloses what's happening. But at least the information gets to you.
A classic example of that is Department of Communities here in Western Australia. Paul White, who was $22 million over several years stolen.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, and people above him had no idea, but the staff underneath had a clue. They knew something was wrong.
Yeah, look, a lot of people, the feedback that you get and what you read in the newspapers is that quite a number of staff members suspected. Some probably knew, but because of his, I suppose, seniority and his ability to make changes in the organisation, people were reluctant to say anything.
If only they had Safe to Say.
If only.
Actually, what is the current state of the art for whistleblowing and reporting in organisations today before Safe to Say?
The status quo, you mean?
Yeah.
Look, a lot of organisations say they provide an anonymous platform.
Yeah.
But it's very easy. Paper doesn't refuse ink. At the end of the day, I can put anonymous down on any brochure and say, I'd like the organisation to prove to the staff that it is anonymous. Now, we can prove through Safe to Say, it's on our website if you want to go on and have a look at the 2-minute video, how we prove it is anonymous. I'd like an organisation to say that's what we mean by anonymous. If you mean, well, we can go onto your system and we can track that you actually, we can track your computer use, well, is that anonymous? Well, to me, it's not. So what I'd say is most organisations have a system that's probably confidential, and to say, and then how confidential is confidential if 4 or 5 or 6 other people know about the situation. So unfortunately, the situation is that whistleblowers, and I don't like the term whistleblowers, but it's a term that's used, came about as police officers looking for help years ago back in England, and they would blow the whistle. So that was it. So, and that, what a whistleblower is, they're looking for help. But unfortunately, they don't get the help. They get the opposite. And we have seen that happen in many organisations where whistleblowers have been sacked. Whistleblowers have been isolated. They've been sent to Coventry. They've been sent to do different tasks. When really, they should look at what a whistleblower has as a gift. The other thing is that people tend to think that if they put in an anonymous reporting system, that we'll get flooded with spurious reports. Now, that might happen initially. It might, but the research says it doesn't happen. This deluge of spurious reports doesn't happen. And I'd say to any management team, you're professional enough to know the difference between a spurious report and one that needs to be looked at. If you can't make that difference, well, I'd give up the game if I was you.
We definitely get some spurious reports. I think one was we had too many logos on our street frontage.
Yeah, and there's no need for Safe to Say for that.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, but people just think that I'll use Safe to Say as the avenue.
I guess they wanted to anonymously express that opinion, and that's fine.
Yeah,
You know?
but also let you know that, and it lets you know that person is probably quite shy, doesn't want to go forward. And
Exactly.
so, okay, you know, it provides the opportunity. And well, is that something you might look at?
So what are the telltale signs of corruption or bad behavior in the workplace that usually ends up that would be helped by anonymous reporting?
Look, telltale signs, sometimes it's quite obvious that something is happening, and some people can be quite blasé about what they're doing in an organisation. But sometimes it might be just a case of you might notice somebody downloading child pornography on a computer, which might shock you. You go home and you might say to your husband and your wife that, X, Y, and Z at work is just down. What will I do about it? Well, something like that I would go to the police. But then again, you might say, I don't want to go to the police about it because... So therefore, Safe to Say is a good way of reporting that to your organisation.
Yeah.
But I'd also say report that through Crime Stoppers as well.
What are the main business risks an owner can see if the company was exposed for criminal actions?
Look, I think that's the question answers itself really. If it's exposed insofar as that, it's brand reputation. You could have an exceptionally good brand, and then it can be ruined at the stroke of a pen. It takes years and years to build trust, and it's very easy to lose it. You can lose it overnight.
And one bad apple can spoil the entire. The entire basket.
But I do also like, it's a very good point you brought up there about the bad apple, because, I like to look at the research in relation to this. And there's one thing I'll say quite a lot is you've got the bad apple theory where people say, it's only one bad apple. If we get rid of the bad apple, well, then everything is fine. But I also like to bring people back to the orchard theory, that sometimes the orchard might be tainted. You don't know it's tainted. But if you take one bad apple out, or 2 bad apples out, or 3 bad apples out, the orchard is still tainted. Sometimes you got to change the whole. You got to spray the whole orchard.
Yeah.
And so, you might put Safe to Say in, and then find out, God, I have a contaminated orchard here. I need to do something about it. So, it's an important. I think it's a very, very important tool for an organisation. Look, I would say it's probably one of the best investments an organisation could make.
Yeah, I for culture, I totally agree, and we've been using it for a while now, and it definitely has helped us, and we definitely get questions sent to us that people wouldn't ask
Yeah. So
Face to
therefore, while it's anonymous, it allows people to, even as you would say, well, there was no need to be anonymous for this, but people want to use the anonymous. So that actually tells you that you have people in your organization who are shy, or probably don't want to open up, don't want to be known, but they want to give you some information.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself is a great way it's an empowerment tool to some people.
I mean, we're not a huge organization, so we have roughly 30 people, give or take. And I would say we get 3 or 4 reports a week.
Yeah.
That are, not super important ones,
Yeah.
and not ones we're going to the police about or anything, but we get information that is important to the culture of Ninja Software.
And Alex and John, is that manageable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's
one thing I get
fantastic.
when I go to an employer and I talk about safe to say, the first, how many reports will I get?
Yeah,
Well, how long is a piece of string? I don't know how bad your orchard is.
that's right.
But I will say one thing, you won't be overwhelmed with the number of reports you get.
No.
And that is for sure. And then someone will say, well, I've had Safe to Say in for a year and I've spent X amount of dollars on it. Just say they spent $10,000 on it. And I got 3 reports or 2 reports. Cost me $5,000 a report. So people can look at it in different ways. And it's, I don't think it should be looked at that way.
No, absolutely not. Well, I think people get more than that. They probably underestimate how much some of their staff want to communicate their thoughts, but don't want to make it formal, send an email or knock on your office.
And look, if we look at the human behaviour in work, we'll see people at meetings, and some people are prepared to take over a meeting.
Yeah.
Other people will say nothing at a meeting. I'm not saying the person who says nothing at a meeting is the person who needs Safe to Say. That's not always the case. Sometimes the person who says everything at the meeting is the person who needs Safe to Say.
Yeah.
It's a funny world. Human behaviour is just so complex.
Especially when anonymity is added.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's something that employers don't think about. But I feel, John, you asked a question, what was it like? I think we're in a world now where you've got to think about providing anonymity to people as opposed to not providing it.
You mentioned we're familiar with the feature, but the two-way conversations a few times for Safe to Say.
Yeah.
It's pretty unique that a anonymous tip can actually have a conversation continue. Why did you introduce this into Safe to Say? Is it something that you've discovered through Crime Stoppers that, like you said, people want to continue the conversation with you, but there's no way to do it currently?
Yeah. Well, it goes 2 ways. If we take the reporter, the person making the report, they like to actually know that something is happening. And right now with Crime Stoppers, there is no two-way anonymous. And I won't go into the reasons for that, but more of it's got to do with the number of reports we get in, that if we were to try and have 60,000 conversations, we get 60,000 reports. If you were to have to try and 60,000 conversations with people, it's not going to be efficient, and it probably cause more problems than it's worth. So leave the policing one to one side. An employer but we know that when people make the report to Crime Stoppers, they actually would like to know what's happening.
Yeah.
So what did happen to that? I put it in. Was that a waste of my time, or was that not a waste of my time? So we take them. They'd like to know, but also the employer would actually like to know a bit more information. If we often hear people saying, "If only I knew a bit more about X or a bit more about Y. If only that person had mentioned where this is happening, or how this is happening, or when it's happening, or So they're the type of questions you can ask back and forth. Now remember, on the forms that Safe to Say has, you can actually develop those forms yourself.
Yes.
So you can ask the type of questions. So over time, depending on the report, you can do an analysis of the reports you get, and then you might say, well, maybe we need to change the form we have to get that type of information. So it's a kind of a thing that builds up over time. You get good at it over time.
Also, in our experience, I would say half the reports we receive are questions. So people actually asking us questions relating to Ninja Software that I guess they didn't feel comfortable asking.
Oh, okay. That's a very good. I didn't see that as as an outcome.
Yeah, sometimes we actually take the question and we put it in a public space and we answer it because we realize that probably everyone has the question.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, it's a personal one. You just
Yeah.
use the two-way reporting. The two-way messaging to respond.
So there you go, another positive.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
All right, cool. Let's get ready to close it up then, I suppose.
Yeah, well, we end every podcast with the same question. So a whimsical question. I don't know if you're a UFC or wrestling fan, but the fighters, when they come out, the lights go down and the smoke machine starts and their intro song comes on, which is meant to introduce the fighter's character to the crowd. What is your intro song?
Oh, I suppose one of the favourite songs I have is Christopherberg, Crusader.
Nice.
Mainly because it tells a story, and I love stories.
Brilliant.
So it tells a story all the way through from start to finish, and I think it's probably one of the best songs. Very similar to Bohemian Rhapsody in a way,
Yeah.
but the Crusader is...
Actually, I don't know, I've heard it.
I have to listen to it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vince.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vince. That was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
You've made it to the end of another episode of Tech Society. Well, that was a great episode. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed making it. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter @Tech Society, head over to the website, subscribe to the newsletter.